So as you heard, I'm the fellow behind both the Agile Data and the Agile Modeling methods. I was also a co-creator of the Discipline Agile Toolkit, along with Mark Lyons, and I also post at Ambysoft.com. I'm very soon I should be merging these sites into a single one, scottambler.com. So keep your eye out for that, probably in the new year, realistically, but I'm started on it now. So how's the presentation going to work out? I'm first going to assign you a bit of work. So I'm a mean guy that way. But then we'll go back and get back around to your assignment towards the end of the presentation. I'm going to first start with some agile ways of thinking, like how do we view the world in the agile data space. Then I'll do a brief overview of Agile DW and BI. But I'm going to spend most of the presentation talking about what are the hard challenges and potential solutions. I also want to point out that I've chosen what I believe to be the top 9. There's far more than just 9 challenges in this space, but I'm gonna go after what I believe to be the top 9. But anyways, let's get into it. So your assignment is actually to think about, well, what hard problems did I miss? So there are more than 9, and so if you're currently struggling, if you or your team are currently struggling with an issue that I don't cover today, then bring it up in the chat. So because hopefully we can get to it. And if it ends up that we get overwhelmed with questions, which sometimes happens, I'm happy to write up a blog. As long as you can get the questions to me, I'm happy to write up a blog or something to answer them. Okay, so let's jump into the Agile Data ways of thinking. What am I talking about here? What's the mindset? So the Agile Data method was originally developed about a little over 20 years ago now, and around 20 years ago, I guess. And we started by describing it as a collection of philosophies or a collection of principles, depending on your point of view. So one of them was to look beyond data. That data is important, but so are other things. So a lot of people like to describe data as the lifeblood of an organization, and I believe that to be true. But when you only have the lifeblood, that's what's called a crime scene. So, because as we know, there's also flesh and skeleton and skin and hair and organs and other good things. So we need to look beyond data. We need to look beyond the lifeblood and look at a more of a holistic picture if we want to be successful. So we need to collaborate closely, both within our teams and with our stakeholders. It's a little bit of motherhood and apple pie here. But unfortunately, I find that many traditional professionals don't collaborate well and don't realize they need to, or don't realize the extent to which they need to collaborate. And they run into trouble as a result. So we'll see a few collaboration strategies coming up. We want to be quality infected. I truly believe the data community has fallen down on quality. And there's, this is more of a generalization, of course, but most organizations suffer from data quality challenges, to be short. And I'm currently working in doing some work in the AI space. And data quality is probably one of their largest challenges right now, because garbage in, garbage out. And we really need to rethink some of our quality approaches in the data space and to fix the quality problems that we have. It's time to step up and fix the actual problem as opposed to looking away. And I realize there's, many reasons why there's quality problems. But at the end of the day, we need to step up and we need to be firm about fixing these quality problems. It's just getting worse with no end in sight. So we need to embrace evolution. The world changes. We're in a VUCA world or a Bounty world or whatever you want to call that. And, great religious arguments over that one. And good, I guess. But the fact is things change. We learn as we go. Our stakeholders change their minds. The environment changes. Everything changes. So we must have techniques that reflect this reality. The model everything up front approach, plan everything up front approach, never had a chance of working and didn't really, which is one of the reasons why we have so many quality challenges. We need to be enterprise aware. We need to do what's right for the organization and arguably for the world, not just what's convenient for our teams. So this is a challenge for the Agile community. Agile is very team focused, which is great, but we need to be enterprise focused as well. So there's some very, very valuable trade-offs here. We want to have a fit for purpose approach. Every person, every team, every organization is unique, facing unique challenges. So one size does not fit all. So if you're looking for just tell me the magic recipe, or give me the 10 the 10 best practices, give me the one methodology to rule them all. Well, this is not Tolkien. So we need to be flexible. We need to be, work in a context sensitive manner. And we need to, and because of evolution, because things change, we also need to change our ways of working as our environment changes. And everyone should be as agile as they can be. It's more of a context-based agile. Be as agile as you can be in the situation that you face, and always strive to get better. To always try to be learning, improving the way the way that you work. So, having said all that, so that provides a philosophical foundation for some of the things I'm going to be talking about today, and I'll map back to these philosophies as we go. But so what am I talking about when I'm talking about Agile Data Warehousing and Agile Business Intelligence? So you ask 10 different people to define something, and you'll probably get at least 10 different answers. So this is my definition of Agile DWBI. The key concepts here are a focus on quality, which, and I appreciate I'm preaching to the choir, in the data vault space, but we really do need to focus on quality. And, we're all working with poor quality data sources for the most part. And the transformation stuff, the transformation that work that we do, yes, it improves data quality and consistency, which is great, but that's a Band-Aid. It's really, we need to view it as such. It's a last ditch effort, really, to address some quality challenges. And we really should be fixing data quality at the source, not on the back end on our data warehouses. So that's a change of philosophy, which we'll talk about. And of course, we need to work in a collaborative and evolutionary manner. We can't do this on our own. We cannot read the minds of our stakeholders, and even if we could, it doesn't matter because they change their minds. So it is what it is. So we really do need to work in a more flexible manner over time. Try to be less predictive, which is weird. But yes, some of the feelings around, or some of the thoughts around, predictive schedules and costs and all that good sort of stuff really aren't helping us, and never really did. So what are the hard problems? What are my top 9 hard problems in the DWBI space? So from an Agile point of view, we have a few challenges. So we have, this upfront data architecture, the traditional stuff, it takes too long. It just really does. We need to find more flexible ways of working. The request to deliver value every sprint, every couple of weeks, is really hard, particularly when you're new to this, and particularly when you're on the, at the very beginning of working on the first release of your overall data warehouse solution. The fact is, we need to install some infrastructure up front. It's hard to find Agile data people. I'll talk about how to address that. There's no easy answer there. And we also have the issue, which is, goes against number 2, is that our sprints are too slow. We need to go faster. So we're all, many teams are already struggling to deliver every 2 weeks, and delivering every 2 weeks is too darn slow for many of our business stakeholders. So I'll talk about what I mean in a bit. The data analytics work takes longer than a single sprint. So, we're being asked to deliver every 2 weeks, yet we have 6 weeks of analysis to do to understand a data source. I've worked on teams where on average, it was 6 to 8 weeks to do the data analysis work and arguably data science work that was required to understand the data source that we were, putting, of the data that we're putting into our data warehouse and then reporting on. So So there's some really serious time challenges here. We're stuck with product owners, the representative stakeholders who they don't understand the data, they don't understand data technologies, they don't understand what we're talking about. What the heck is data science? Right? They don't understand. And fair enough, they're not data experts, although on a data warehousing project, they arguably should be. We have way too much data technical debt, quality problems, and our stakeholders don't want to work with us. And that's a general problem in IT, but tends to be a significant problem in the data warehousing space for many reasons. So let's address these challenges one at a time. So upfront architecture, what can we do in the Agile space? Now, the extremists, the Agile extremists will tell you they don't do any modeling up front, they don't do any planning up front, they just jump into it. Yeah, that's cute. That's my entire response to that nonsense. Is that's cute. They're often misguiding you to what they're actually doing, or they're working on something spectacularly simple. Well, that's not the case here. So a couple issues that I want to share with you about upfront architecture. So first of all, DV2 has done a lot of architectural and design thinking for you. There's great patterns in DV2. If you're not yet trained up on DV2, I highly suggest you do it. And I have no skin in this game, by the way. I'm not a DV2 trainer. I'm not making any money from trying to sell you DV2. I've been pointing to DV2 and working with it for years because it's some really great concepts and ideas here. But I don't make a dime off this. So anyways, you may or may not want to trust me, but I would highly suggest looking at DV2 if you have not done so already, but I suspect most of you have, given this is a DV2 user group. Another thing, when I'm working on it with a team, I do want to do some upfront modeling. I want to get a handle on what are my upfront, what are my likely data sources? And this could be a dozen data sources. It could be hundreds of data sources. I've worked in some really nasty scenarios where we had an incredible number of data sources that we potentially needed to work with, and over time pretty much did. So I need to have a list. What's my bill of materials, I guess you would call it, for potential data sources. But I don't need to go crazy. I don't need to know. So I might be working with NC 1701, but I don't need to know all the great and gory details. Eventually I might, but today I don't. But I do need to know basic things like who owns this, how do I get access to it? I might not have access yet, but I should at least have an understanding of how I would get access. What type of data, what are the main entity types in that data source? What's the quality? How often is it refreshed, if at all? Well, I hope it's refreshed, but anyway, so, basic fundamental information, because I need to prioritize. I need to understand where I could potentially go for data when we get into the implementation effort. I also, and this is arguably from a requirements point of view now, I should also probably have a reasonable idea of what the main entity types are. I'm a firm believer in having a high level conceptual diagram very early on. Now, this is a simple one, but it shows the level of detail that I need. What are my main entity types? What are my main relationships between them? And I'm not going to get this right. I want to have a good shot at it. It has to be reasonably right. I want to have an understanding of the landscape. And that's it, right? I can dive down later. So, for example, I know there's data behind the student entity type. Lots of data. There could be many, and there will be many more entity types and tables in behind this at some point. But right now, I just need to know that I have students and they have memberships and all that sort of stuff. So, because I want to be able to dive down. And I might also start mapping my data sources on that previous slide to these entity types, and maybe have a little bit of a handle on data lineage, like very high level understanding of data lineage, and particularly combined with the understanding of what the quality is and what subset of that overall domain. Because a given data source might, if it were a large financial organization, a given data source might only be customer information for insurance, but not customer information for banking stuff. So these are the sorts of things I want to have a reasonable handle on at the beginning, at least for the higher priority entity types. I also want to, and this is a general thing, it's not just about initial modeling or initial artifacts, but it's true of any artifacts throughout. I want to have artifacts that are just barely good enough, that are just sufficient for my needs. And now traditionalists will often balk at this because they're not listening to the terminology usually. When something is more than good enough, any investment in it is a waste. Think about that, right? This meets my needs right now. So if I continue polishing it, if I continue working on it, that might be fun. Okay, so it's entertaining. That's nice. But I'm wasting time. I'm wasting money by putting more effort into something that doesn't need it. At least doesn't need it right now. If something is not yet good enough, and if I've got the skills to do the job, that might be a big if. But if we do have the skills to do the job, then investing more effort into it will add value, and that's okay. But once I hit this dashed line and go beyond it, then once I go beyond it, once I get to the right of it, I'm wasting time, and the overall value is going down because I'm spending more than I'm getting out. Now the challenge, of course, is that this dashed line is it's like quality. It's in the eye of the beholder. So how do you know when something is just barely good enough? Well, what factors should we consider? Well, I want to do more modeling, put more effort into something, do more planning, and modeling and planning to me are basically the same thing, or different flavors of the same thing. We're thinking before we're doing. So the more risk that I face, the more complexity that I face, the greater the desire for predictability. So if the management crowd is on my case for an upfront cost or an upfront schedule, or an update to an existing cost or cost estimate or schedule estimate, if I'm partway through the effort, then I'm probably gonna have to do more modeling. If I'm in a regulatory compliance situation and I understand the regulations, there's a big if. Don't let the bureaucrats tell you what the regulations are requiring. Instead, read the ever exciting regulatory compliance that you're actually supposed to be, addressing, because the bureaucratic interpretation of the regulations and reality are often two very different things. So it's often worth your while to read the very, very exciting regulatory descriptions. Being facetious about that. I'm not being facetious about reading them. I'm being facetious about them being interesting. But what motivates me to do less modeling? Well, if I have a highly skilled team, they need less information to do the job. If I have good access to stakeholders and I can ask questions, right? So if I just, if we're working on, that student entity a few slides ago, and I don't understand an element, or I don't understand where to get the data from, or which data source to use, I'm confused about something. Well, if I've got access to the people that can tell me point me in the right direction, and it's easy access and timely, then I need less upfront information. If it's easy to change what I'm working on, if I have the skills to easily evolve an existing production database, for example, and I'll talk about how to do that later. If I have those skills, then I have to do less modeling up front to get, because I have less need to get it right at the beginning. If I face great uncertainty, now here's a weird concept. If I face great uncertainty, I need to do less modeling, because when things are uncertain, they're more likely to change. So any investment that I make right now today in understanding and exploring something that changes tomorrow, it's going to be a waste. Not perfectly intuitive, but that's the reality on the ground. And if I have a very collaborative way of working, and this reflects, access to stakeholders and other people that can help, then the more collaborative we are, the more effective we are at working together, the less upfront effort we need to do, or the less modeling, the less documentation we need to do. So, big challenge. Hopefully I was preaching the choir and all that. Probably wasn't, but that's okay. So that's why we have questions at the end. So another challenge, how do we deliver value every sprint as a data warehousing team, or as a BI team, DW BI team? Well, one technique, what the Agile community has been doing now for several decades, is a technique called vertical slicing. And what we do is we deliver a little bit of behavior, a little bit of functionality every increment, every iteration, every sprint. So every couple of weeks, we have more new stuff to deliver. and put in the hands of our stakeholders to add more value to our stakeholders. Now, this can be easier said than done in the DW space. So if we're just a few weeks into a project, it's going to be pretty hard to get something out the door the first 2 weeks because of other issues, right? We don't have the infrastructure in place. We are still getting access to the data stores, for example. We're still struggling with just data analysis effort to understand what the first few data stores are all about. So, so for example, I might be, I'm on the second week of a DW project. If I can get, one data element populated in my data warehouse, that might be one heck of a win. Now, I hope I can do more than that, but that might be one heck of a win, right? So sometimes, particularly early, the vertical slices are relatively trivial. But if I'm several months into an effort, or particularly if we're evolving an existing data warehouse solution that's already up and running in production, I fully expect to be able to deliver more data elements, more reporting views, more data mart tables, more reports every 2 weeks. That's completely fair into production every 2 weeks. And I'll argue later that's pretty darn slow. But anyways, but this is what we need to, this is the point we need to get to. So how do you vertically slice the work for a data warehouse? Well, the Agile folks like to use a technique called user stories, and those are small chunks of functionality that an overview of a small chunk of functionality that brings value to the stakeholders. Now, user stories are pretty good, but they're not quite there for data warehouse work. So I prefer a modification to user stories that I call question stories. So, and they're basically focused on data requirements and on answering questions. So why do we build data warehouses? Well, it's to bring information to our stakeholders, make information available so that way they can make better decisions, or they can do their jobs more effectively. So the issue becomes one of, well, what, to understand the requirements for a data warehouse, what are the questions that people, why would people want to use this data warehouse? What questions are they trying to answer? What information do they need? What are they trying to get at? So this is why we develop something called question stories. And for those of you familiar with user stories, you'll be sitting there going, whoop-de-doo. It's basically a modification of a user story. Yes, exactly. It's a user story focused on data rather than on usage. So slightly different, slight modification. So that's the basic idea. So why is this important? Well, what we want to do is work on one question at a time, or several questions at a time during a 2-week period, if we're doing sprints. So having small requirements that we can nail one at a time. So when I go to implement that first user story, that as a sales manager, I want to know the level of sales, blah blah blah. I will do just the work required to implement that story. Now, when I go on to the next story, then I'll be adding on to more stuff, and I might have to rework some of the stuff that I've done previously. So the idea here is we want to be adding real value for our stakeholders on a really regular basis, every few weeks or even more often than that. And that's nice, that's cute, as I like to say. But say we're at the beginning. Say this is the first release of a data warehouse. Well, we've got a challenge here, right? How do we get the infrastructure in place? Well, one of the things I want to observe is that there are a lot of great DV2 vendor solutions out there. So leverage them. Yeah, you got to spend a little time doing proof of concepts and stuff like that, but you don't need to reinvent the wheel. So one of the incredibly great things about the DV2 space is that the many vendors have gotten behind it and are producing great tools to implement it. So leverage them. Also embrace evolution. One of the Agile data philosophies. Things are going to change. This is a picture of somebody doing a renovation to their house. Looks like they're putting an addition onto the back of it. So yeah, you're not going to get everything right at the beginning. You just won't. Your needs change over time. Maybe they're maybe the kids have moved out and they want to have the ideal home, or maybe they're having another kid. and they need more space, which is why they're doing a major reno. When my daughter came along, well, just before that, we did a major renovation to my basement to buy us more space at this house. This is my office right now in the basement. So anyways, so things change. So even within physical structures like houses, your needs evolve, your situation changes. And this is certainly the case in the intangible space, in the data space or the software space. So we can't think everything through up front, but we really do want to think about the future. So for example, when they're building this addition onto the house, maybe they're also making it possible. So that way, if they need another addition, or maybe they need to build up. So it looks like they're building out right now, but maybe I see they're using steel beams. Maybe they're putting enough structure in place that if they have to build up at some point, maybe in a few years when they have more money, they can do that easily, as opposed to having to rip everything out. So a few architecture decisions today might put you in a position to be more flexible in the future. It doesn't mean I need to build the second or third story today, but I want to make sure that if I ever do need to have a second or third story, that it's a reasonably easy change to do. That requires a little skill, little more skill in it than not. But anyways, something to think about. So an implication is that sometimes the first release of your data warehouse is going to be bigger than you'd normally prefer. So it's not just the easy, little vertical slices that the Agilists want to talk about, but sometimes you've got that big chunk on the left here. The first release has to be a bit bigger because you've got infrastructure to put in place. You've got to have enough data in your data warehouse to run a few reports, perhaps, or to provide enough data, enough data in the data marts to do interesting reporting against, right? So there's this minimum functionality, this minimum business increment that you need for your first release to attract people. Because it's really easy to say, oh, I just need to release one data element and I'm good to go. Nobody really cares about that. Probably nobody cares about that, I should say, right? They want a little bit more than that. Okay, so here's a really big problem, which I don't have a good solution for, sadly, is the lack of Agile data people. So Agile Data calls out some fairly common roles, data scientist, data engineer, and arguably there should be an Agile in front of all these roles. I'm not a big fan of using Agile as an adjective everywhere I can. But, the fact is, we are really talking about Agile data architects and Agile data scientists. And to be fair, data scientists tend to be very Agile just by the very nature of science, if they're doing true data science. Data engineers aren't always necessarily Agile, nor are data analysts. Or data analysts tend to be just because of the nature of what they do as well, but certainly they might be able to be more Agile. So how do we find these people? Well, they're pretty hard to find. And so the challenge is right now is we need to grow them ourselves. So we need to build grow people who are more along the lines of generalizing specialists. Because one of the challenges is if I have to fill a team where I have one data architect, one or more data scientists, several data engineers, several data analysts who can back up my product owner. And these are just the main Agile data roles, let alone other team roles like product owner or Scrum Master, team lead, whatever you want to call that. The challenge here is how do I probably can't find all these people. So if I have, if I try to build a team of specialists, if I've got all the specialists, great, why not? But I've never actually seen that. So what I end up having to do is, I've got a few people who are reasonably good at data, but they might not, they might need some help with their data analysis skills. They might need some help with their engineering skills and so on. So what I want to do is start building people who are generalizing specialists. So maybe I do have one or two people who are really good data analysts, but they don't have the data science background. They don't have the data engineering background. So, maybe I've got a couple people who are really great data engineers, but once again, they're not really architects or not really scientists and so on. But if I can get them working together and spreading the knowledge out and prodding them along, motivating them to pick up skills outside of their specialty, like still be good at their specialty, but pick up more skills, then I can, what I want them to do is move towards being more T-skilled or more cross-functional. And yeah, this is hard. It takes time, but they end up being more valuable, both to my organization, but also they end up being more hireable. They tend to have better and more enjoyable careers because they have better options. And they might stumble into something that they really love. So why not? Like, you might have a fantastic data engineer today, and yet maybe they really get into being a data scientist, or at least some aspects of data science. They might never be an awesome data scientist, but they could probably be pretty good at a few aspects of data science. And why not, right? So then, and what happens is, when I have people with this wider range of skills, then it's easier to build teams. Because so instead of having to look for somebody, the one person with data, who's a data science expert, if I have 3 or 4 people that have some background in data science, then they can still get the job done. Yeah, they might not be as good as an expert, but it's better than not having anybody with that expertise at all. So the wider the range of skills, the more employable you are, more than likely the more enjoyable your job is going to be, and frankly, the more valuable you are as an employee. So invest in your people. Get training, get coaching, allow them to work collaboratively. So do non-solo work. So get them mobbing, multiple people working on a single problem, or get them pairing at least 2 people, or even better yet, triads of people working on a single question story, for example. So my team of 3, my sub team of 3 people, we're going to work on this question story this afternoon and get it done, as opposed to, I do my part, hand it off to you, you do your part, hand it off to somebody else, and so on, which is long and drawn out and tends to be quality challenged. So here's a big thing. Sprints are too slow. And this is a bit of agile heresy for you, or at least heresy for the agilists. Sprints. So here's the scenario. So I'm an executive at a company. I come to my data warehousing team and I say, I need to know this, right? So say I'm an executive at Twitter. Okay. So let's make it timely. I'm an executive at Twitter, and I need to know how I can, what people I need to keep, because, new management, all that good sort of stuff. So I need a report. I need some sort of view, or some sort of HR view into people's skills, and, whatever my exact need is. I'm making it up on the fly, so I don't know, but I've got an exact need, and I say, hey, I need this. It's not the data warehouse. How can you help me? So if we have a data warehousing team that's following a Scrum-based approach, like what we see on this slide, where you might have had some upfront ideation work, but when you're hot and heavy in construction, every 2 weeks, at the beginning of the 2 weeks, we pull some, we pull the work off the top of the stack, off the top of the backlog. We start working through it, and at the end of the 2-week sprint, we have something that we can potentially release into production. That's great. That's, team's happy, chugging along, doing its thing. But now I'm an executive, and I need this information right now, because I'm making some serious decisions right now. And the team comes and says, well, we're in the middle of this sprint. It ends next Friday, but we can get it done the following sprint. So it'll be done in, we'll have it out to you in 3 weeks. And I'm sitting here as the executive going, wait a minute, this is like 2 or 3 hours worth of work, and you're telling me it takes you 3 weeks to get it done? Well, yeah, so anyway, so you can see the problem. So something that, a little chunk of work that's 2 or 3 hours should only take 2 or 3 hours, right? So yes, there's a difference between work time and calendar time, but the issue is one of these regular sprints, which is a good idea in many situations, force you into this small batch mode. And because you get forced into a small batch mode, it can elongate your calendar sometimes. And yeah, Scrum will allow you to do expedited work and stuff like that. But then there's a lot of argument about that. So anyways, so a sprint-based approach isn't perfect in all situations. So what I found is that so I should point out, so anyway, so this sort of a life cycle is really good for that first chunk of bread. Remember a couple slides ago, I had like the big chunk of bread on the left and then a bunch of little slices on the right. This works really well for that big chunk of bread, right? Because you're dealing with big convoluted problems usually. Get all this infrastructure in place, blah, 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 get some real value in place before we can release, right? So working 2-week sprints is probably pretty good. But once we're up and running in production, then suddenly the types of requirements, the requirements flow is different. Because now I get these, I get different types of requirements, or different priorities of requirements. Sometimes I get these high priority things that need to be expedited and done right away. Other times it's just, yeah, this is important. Here's this new question story. This is important. Get it done. Prioritize and get it done whenever you got time to do it, right? So what we want to do is have more of a lean, Kanban-based approach in this situation. So once our data warehouse is up and running in production, we switch over, if we've got the skills and if we're allowed to do it based on the culture of organization, we switch over from more than likely a Scrum-based approach with these small batches of work called sprints, and instead move into more of a continuous flow type of work where I'm pulling one item off out of my backlog at a time, whatever's the most important thing to work on right now, and we get it done, right? So if this executive really has this issue of, man, I need to know this HR report, I need to have this HR report thing by the end of the day because we're letting people go, or I'm trying to rescue people, or I'm trying to save people. Let's make it positive. Then I really want, my team really wants to get this out the door. So let's do that this afternoon and release it at the end of the day, right? So 3 hours of the work takes about 3 hours. So how do we do this sort of thing? Well, first we have to have the, right sort of mindset, right sort of life cycle. Other ways of doing this, negotiate stakeholder expectations. Maybe this report or this new data is not needed this afternoon. Maybe towards the end of the week is just as good. Maybe not in this case, but maybe, who knows? And maybe shorten our sprints. So instead of going for 2-week sprints, which a lot of teams prefer, I found that going to 1-week sprints pretty much addresses the issues, right? Like it's pretty rare to have these, really high priority things that need to be done right away, but it does happen. But the longer your sprint, the greater the chance of some high priority thing coming in needing to be done right now. The shorter my sprint, just the lower the odds of that, right? It's going to happen every so often, sure enough. But if I'm releasing every Friday, telling somebody, yeah, I can, here it is Wednesday afternoon, and I can do it, we can get this out the door on Friday. Oh, okay. Maybe I can live with that, right? So it depends, but there's different ways. Another big challenge, data analytics tends to take longer than a sprint, be it 2 weeks or even 1 week. So here in this situation, where we're following a Scrum-based approach, so we're in sprint 5, but we're looking ahead. We're doing look-ahead planning or backlog refinement, whatever you want to call that. It's really look-ahead planning. And what we're realizing is that we've identified what question stories we're going to work on in these upcoming sprints. And the reason why we're doing this is because of the lead time we need to do the data analysis work. So here we are, we're in sprint 5, we're looking ahead 4 sprints just due to the nature of what we're dealing with. And like I said, I've been on teams where it was 6 to 8 weeks of data analysis on average in order to implement a single story. So that was just the reality. I've been on other teams. Now that was a bit extreme, but I've worked on other teams where it's very common to see 3 to 4 weeks of analysis work on average. So just because of the complexity of the data that these teams are facing. So anyways, so in sprint 9, we want to focus on 3 question stories, 9A, 9B, and 9C, whatever they are. And we've done a reasonable guesstimate of how much analysis we need to do. And and we're planning backwards. So for 9B, we're going to have to start doing look-ahead data analysis, just normal data analysis, starting in sprint 6 in order to be ready to implement in sprint 9, and so on. So you can read the graph. And of course, we have the same issue in sprint 8, in sprint 7, and whatever we think we're going to be implementing in sprint 6, right? So there's some planning complexity here. and overhead. Let's call it like it is. This is planning overhead, and this is injected purely because of the Scrum-based approach that this team is following. Now, to get rid of or to deal with the overhead, or to at least address it. So a couple points I want to make. So first, it's the nature of the need to do this look ahead analysis, or to do this analysis work, is not the issue. This is the nature of the beast, right? Just the complexity of the work that we're doing requires us to do this analysis work. The challenge becomes in the Agile way of working. So here we have, in the lean continuous delivery approach, we're still doing the analysis work, but because we pull one chunk of work in at a time, or whenever we have capacity, we pull in one more piece of work. And what we do is we just declare that analysis work is part of the overall effort. So if we have 4 weeks of analysis and a week of implementation and testing, so be it. That's 5 weeks if I get my math right. If we have a week and a half of analysis work and half a week of development work, great, it's 2 weeks, right? So we do all the work required to get the job done, and we get rid of this planning overhead stuff because we're pulling in things on a just-in-time basis. So it's a lot easier to staff, it's a lot easier to lead these sorts of teams. And this is simply because we've moved to a more of a lean Kanban-based approach. And for those of you familiar with Scrum and Kanban, this has been an ongoing religious debate for at least 20 years. And this is one of the main differences or the main contention points between those two methodologies. But this is the reality on the ground for data warehousing teams. So this is, once again, is one of the reasons why I suggest using a Scrum-based approach to get going for release 1, but then shifting over to a Kanban-based approach for release 2+. Just due to the greater flexibility and less overhead. So another challenge that we face, and I'm just about to get to questions. Another challenge that we face. My product owner doesn't understand the data. They don't have a data background. They're coming from the business side, or maybe they understand the data for whatever business unit they're coming from, but they don't understand the data across the organization, perhaps, right? So what's the solution? The product owners need to collaborate closely with the Agile data professionals. A very common pattern that I see is that the product owner works closely with Agile data analysts. So these people that are doing the look-ahead data analysis work are doing it at the behest of the product owner. Now, ideally, the product owner has these skills and would be actively involved in the data analysis work, but do they have the skills? Do they have the time? All those good questions, right? So anyways, if you don't have the skills, well, get trained, get coached, work closely with the people that have the skills. That way you can pick up the skills from these people. Another thing that to improve things is a technique from Agile modeling called active stakeholder participation. This is based on the extreme programming technique called on-site customer. And the basic idea with on-site customer is if you're working side by side with your stakeholders, you can easily ask them questions. And the business stakeholders need to do their normal job too, right? So it's never quite as perfect as just turning to somebody and asking a question, but maybe they're available an hour a day or 15 minutes a day, or they'll respond to email and give you a call if need be, right? So there's different ways we can do that. So that's on-site customer. Agile stakeholder participation takes it one step further and says, well, wait a minute, these stakeholders, they're the experts, they're the ones that know what they want, roughly, or at least better than we do, and they're the one usually better than we do, and they might know the data, or at least some of the data, and they've got the business skills. So why can't they be involved with the modeling and some of the work? Self-service BI is a classic example of some of these low-code, no-code development tools. Classic example of bringing the stakeholders into the actual development process. Why not? And all the Agile modeling techniques, Post-its on whiteboards and just whiteboard sketches and stuff like that, all about making it simple enough for our stakeholders to be actively involved, to share their business expertise, and to spread the work out. So if you're short of IT people right now, offloading work, and you might not want to be completely blatant about it, but offloading some of your analysis and design, or at least the analysis work, off onto your stakeholders, not such a bad idea. Of course, they're also short people too, so reality gets in the way on that one. And of course, we want to train and coach the product owner, give them, if they're missing skills, well, help them get the skills. And once again, help them become generalizing specialists and broaden their skill set. Another problem, technical debt, low quality data. So this is, I love this picture. It's, here have these beautiful fish, probably in the Mediterranean, and they're swimming past garbage. Right, so they're swimming. Their environment has been soiled with this, plasticky, garbagey stuff, whatever that is, and that's not healthy for them. It's not healthy for us. We all know about the problems of fish with little plastic in it and stuff like that. So a lot of challenges here, and this is the challenge that we face in the data space. We've got a lot of great quality data out there, but we also have a lot of poor quality data intermixed with it. So our good quality data is swimming in the pollution. We need to deal with the pollution. So we need to fix these databases. So how do we do that? So we want to be quality infected. We have to be phenomenally intolerant of data quality problems. Just stop horsing around on this. Just stop it. Fix the problems. Push back when you're told we don't have enough time to do this. We don't have this. We don't have the budget. We don't have the time. Make the freaking time. Push back. Stop listening to the project managers. And project managers, they're being pushed as well. But we've got to fix these problems. One of the ways to do this is with database refactoring. So say we've got a production database, we've got a customer table in it. So we get this customer data out in production, and it's being accessed by 1,000 different applications running on 1,000 different platforms, owned by 1,000 different groups. So you don't have any control over this, right? So, but we've got data quality problems, so we should fix them, right? Because if I've got 1,000 applications accessing poor quality data, well, what do you think is happening? Well, you got 1,000 applications that are either working with bad data or they've got code to clean up the data. What a waste of effort that is, right? All these Band-Aid solutions. Fix the data. So how do you do that? Well, here's an example. So say our quality problem is absolutely trivial. In this case, we've got a column named FName, and the name is wrong. So, if you're in a position where, poorly named columns are your biggest quality problem, frankly, I would call that a win. But the point is if you don't know how to solve an absolutely trivial problem of renaming a column safely, you don't have the skills to do something that is interesting. So in this case, I've got 1,000 different applications, not owned by me. Oh, and they're on 1,000 different platforms, 1,000 different technologies, worst case scenario, right? So, and they're all accessing FName for some strange reason. So if I simply rename that column and release it in production right now, because that's just an alter table, no big deal, no big one, right? I'm going to break 1,000 apps, and that will more than likely get me fired. So I don't do that. What I instead do is I put the first name column in place, the thing we actually want. I keep the FName column in place, and I put a trigger in place to keep them in sync with each other. Because right now I got 1,000 applications that are potentially updating FName, right? So, and over time, what we do is during the interim, during this deprecation period, we tell people, well, wait a minute, we're going to remove FName 3 years from now, whatever the reasonable time frame would be, or 3 months from now, if maybe you're working really fast at your organization. So you need to update your code and deploy it and test it and all good sort of stuff to start working with first name. So over time, these 1,000 different applications will get reworked until they're all finally accessing first name. And then at that point in time, I can safely delete FName and the trigger, because there's an overhead with that trigger, obviously. And triggers are not the only way of doing this, but it's a brute force way that gets the job done. And there's other refactorings that you're not going to be implement with, let's say, views. But anyways, we can safely evolve our database schema. And yeah, there's a little bit of overhead here in doing this. There's work to be done. There's organizational overhead because somebody's got to, we got to find a way to announce this work. We got to find a way to, we hopefully have naming conventions in this case. And of course, 3 years from now or 3 months from now, somebody's got to, do the trivial work of removing F name and synchronize first name. So a little bit of overhead. But we can safely dig our way out of the quality holes now. So this book, Refactoring Databases, I'm a co-author of it, so I'm a tad biased, but it has over 65 proven refactorings with source code. So it's not magic. There's no, it's no theoretical nonsense going on there. It's all practical, real world stuff. If you've got the ability to type in code from a book, or better yet, download a refactoring tool, then you can do this too. So it's all proven stuff. You don't have to trust me at all. You can read for yourself. Finally, our stakeholders don't want to work with us. So it's really easy to say, oh yeah, we need active stakeholder participation and blah, blah, blah. And they can't be bothered because they've got their full-time jobs. They're probably not impressed with some of our previous things that we've done to them or for them, or however you want to spin that. So how can we get our stakeholders back on our side? Well, first of all, we need to be delivering frequently. One of the challenges with these big bang, let's take 6 months or a year or so to get something out the door, is that they're phenomenally risky, and they have a huge failure rate. The traditional data warehousing projects, the first release almost always tends to be a failure, like the 80, 85, 90% failure rate. It's horrendous. And the reason why is the requirements change over time. Even if they got the requirements done right up front, which is rarely the case, but even if they did in that one year period or 18-month period, the requirements tend to change. Just the nature, particularly these days, but it's been like this for a couple decades now. So we want to have frequent value delivery. And like I said, the first release might take a couple months to get out the door because of all this infrastructure we got to get in place. But, let's start delivering every 2 weeks or every week or every night. Continuous delivery teams can deliver several times a day. So that so somebody comes to me in the morning with this, 3 hours of the work to do, I might be able to get it out by lunch. Why not? Right? As if it's high priority. So anyways, but the value of delivering value frequently is that, well, first of all, they can see how their money is being spent. They can see us making progress, and they can change their minds because their environment our stakeholders' environment changes. So they need to change the requirements, and we need to be able to react to these changing requirements. So that's the value of all of this. So this is why we implement question stories, these small little chunks of work. Smaller tends to be better, particularly when it comes to more mature data warehouse solutions, and having active stakeholder participations. And the interesting thing is, as you start to deliver more frequently, the requests for when's this going to cost, when are you going to release, go away. They are more likely to, more willing to work with you because, if somebody comes to me and says, I need this, oh, okay, well, let's sketch out quickly what you need or what you want, work with me. And then here, I'll get something done. I'll show it to you. We'll tweak it, get it done, and have a couple of rounds of that. And maybe a day or so later, we really, truly nail it. They can see that putting time in with you was valuable because they got what they needed. But if it's like, well, we'll put it in the 2023 release, they're going to roll their eyes, okay, yeah, whatever, and walk away, right? Because they know you're jerking them around at that point. So just to wrap up here, some parting thoughts. So the increasing pace of change, the increasing complexity we face, just the increasing volume of data, it's gotten so crazy the last few years, demands nothing less than complete data agility. We really do need to rethink the way that we're working.